Hello, this is Gary.
Hi, Gary. This is Corey Feldman calling.
Corey Feldman. No way. It can't be Corey.
Yes, sir. How are you?
Doing good, man. What's going on with you?
Good, good. Just shipping out boxes and, getting ready for our launch in 2 days here. So,
Yeah,
good times.
that's right.
Good times.
Yeah, Wednesday is the day, right? You've been waiting for this.
Wednesday's the day. That's
Awesome.
right. My God, a few delays here, a few delays, more than we expected. I
Yeah,
mean, a lot of delays, obviously, given COVID, it's
yeah.
it's impossible to do anything. I'm still not 100% we're even having our party on Wednesday because I have to make
Oh,
sure
wow.
that, there's going to be enough people that can actually attend because everybody's got COVID in the world right
Oh,
now, it
yeah.
seems like, and it's just such a risky thing to set up anything. It's crazy.
Yeah,
It's
it
like,
is.
you plan stuff, months and months in advance, and then it gets pushed or it gets rescheduled or it gets canceled, and then you got to reset it, and then you
Right,
do it again, and then it's just this constant tug and pull of resources
right.
and time and energy, and it just gets so frustrating for everybody. So,
Yeah,
we're in a difficult place and a difficult time in this reality and in this society right now, and I think we're all just kind of trying to strap up our bootstraps and be
yeah.
big kids and figure out how we hang on.
That's how you said it, man. Well, it's a box set, right? It's called Love Left 2, Arm Me with Love, right? So a box set,
Well,
right?
the box set is called Love Left 2.1,
Point. Okay.
and within the box set is my brand new album, Love Left 2,
Oh,
Arm Me
okay.
with Love.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, so that just so you're clear on that. And then yeah, so what the box set is, just as an overall view, is really it's a remix remaster box set, right? So it's
Okay.
all about, the Love Left album, which is kind of the quintessential, you know, early 90s first concept solo album, of my career.
Right.
Which came out in 93, but the whole point of this is that I started recording music in 1986.
Okay.
A lot of people were unaware of that at the time because I didn't release it.
Right. Right.
I didn't release anything until 1989, and that was my first release, and that was only a vinyl single, which came out with the film soundtrack for Dream a Little Dream, and it was actually the first promotional single off the soundtrack album.
Okay.
However, it was not included in the actual soundtrack album. So even though it came out under the label and it came out, on the opposite side of another song from the soundtrack album, it didn't make it onto the album because it was delivered, I guess, like a day late.
Okay.
So we never actually had the song Something in Your Eyes on the soundtrack album or in the film, but it was still released under the same distribution and with the album package. So that was the very first song. And then after that, we didn't put out anything else really. There was a couple things like What's Up with the Youth, which became this kind of pop culture hit, which I performed in a couple places, most notably Howard Stern,
Right.
because that's where it became very famous.
Right.
And then another song which I was supposed to release as a single, which we never released as a single, but I went and performed on Much Music in Canada, called Honesty, and that's another one. It became this viral kind of clip on YouTube. But all of these songs kind of came out here and there, and then in between all of that, there was these film soundtracks like Rock and Roll High School
Yeah.
Forever and Dream a Little Dream 2, National Lampoon's Last Resort. So there were all these movies that I was putting out music for that each one of them, when I made the deal, said, oh, don't worry, you'll be on the soundtrack album.
Right.
Henceforth, we didn't put the songs out in any other format because they were all supposed to be part of those albums. And then, for one reason or another, those films didn't put out soundtrack albums.
Wow.
So, what ended up happening is all of this stuff just kind of kept collecting through the years, right? So, eventually, when we decided to do this project, the very first thing was, oh, this album's 25 years old. It would be great because, in the beginning, when we first put it out, we couldn't give it away. Literally, I sat on those first 1,000 CDs for over a decade. I
Wow.
mean, literally, the very first, ones, we were literally handing them out because there was really no internet in those days. In 1993, the internet was just being born,
Right.
and there was no marketing tools. There was no iTunes. There was no way to get your music out there to the world if you didn't have a big label deal. So we were this tiny little independent company trying to put out an album, and nobody knew about it. We really didn't have any way to publicize it. That was during a lull in my career between the 80s and 90s, where I was trying to reestablish myself
Right.
after everything I went through,
Right.
and I wasn't getting a lot of press. So it was very hard for me to get press. It was very hard for me to get the word out. And basically, nobody knew about it unless, I happened to do a concert or I happened to do an appearance where I would sell a few at the shows. So it was a very slow process to get the word out about that album. And then, thanks to YouTube, thanks to iTunes, digital releases years later and stuff like that, all of a sudden they started, selling left and right.
Right.
And then next thing you know, it went from like, hey, we can't get rid of these things to they're gone and now they're out of print,
Right.
you know? And so it became very quickly like, okay, I'm going to have to either reprint that album, which to be honest, wasn't a well thought out album. It was something that was thrown together because a friend of mine, who was producing movies that I was in at the time, saw that I was struggling as an independent artist and said, hey, I'm going to create a label just to get your album finished and to get it out and throw together whatever tracks you have ready to go and let's do this. It was kind of
Right.
like a really quick decision, not well planned, not well thought out, which is why, there was never any lyrics in the original album artwork. There was never really many liner notes. It was a 2-page, kind of folded paper that went inside it as the cover
Yeah.
and the inside. So it was just sloppy. And so I thought, we I don't want to reprint that because it seems pointless. Why spend a bunch of money reprinting something that's really not that great when the songs themselves are pretty cool and they have great historical value now for the cult base of my fans.
Yeah.
So why not turn that into a better project? So what we decided to do was go back and try and salvage some of those master tapes. So I found all the master tapes that we originally recorded the stuff on, and I said, "Well, what do you do with this in this day and age? It's not like any recording studio you go to has got a tape machine
Yeah.
sitting in the corner.
Right.
They just don't
Don't
do
do
it
that anymore.
anymore."
Yep.
Right. So I happen to be, with a friend of mine who happens to be friends with Don Dawkin.
Cool.
And Don and I were sitting and talking, and he says, "Yeah, I'm working on this great, collection. I'm like, redoing all of my early stuff, and it's going to be called The Lost Tapes. And we're literally taking the tapes from my early recordings, we're baking them, and then we're remixing them and putting them back out as brand new stuff." And I
Cool.
was like, well, there you go. How do you do that?
Right.
Like, what's the process? How do
Right.
I get in on this? And he said, well, it is a process, and it's a very tedious process and one that is not guaranteed to work. It's a crapshoot because basically what you're doing is you're taking these 25-year-old tapes who've, basically essentially lost their magnets.
Yeah.
And not only that, but especially my stuff had been sitting in a dank, dark garage, on and off through the years where there had been everything from floods to rats to, you name it.
Wow.
And this stuff had gotten water damage, mold, I mean, all kinds of problems. So we had to go through this very arduous process of meticulously cleaning these tapes,
Wow.
first of all,
Mm.
chemical treatments, going through each inch of these, whatever they are, 25 or 50 feet worth of tape. I don't even know how many feet are in these things, but
Yeah.
they're obviously quite long,
Right.
and they go by inch by inch by inch to clean all of the bad stuff off. Then you put it through the baking process, and then you hope that you get all the magnets back in place where they belong.
Gee.
And then you've got one shot to run it through the tape machine again. You have to, first of all, find the tape machine, somebody who's got a tape machine to run it on. Then you run it, and then you transfer it to digital. And then once you've got it in digital format, then you get to start from scratch
Wow.
and remix it as if it's day one.
Wow.
So that's basically what it took just to get to the point of having these songs. Once we got into that process, and Don, God bless him, got all of this done for us
Yeah.
with his people. And once we got that stuff done and we got it all digitized, then it was like, okay, now, whoa, what's this song? What's that song? Oh, right, I remember this. Here's a demo of, my first song. It's so simple that we, used on a TV after school special that I did with Drew Barrymore and Tatum O'Neal called 15 and Getting Straight. And we all sang the song. It's so simple.
Yeah.
It was one of the very first ones I wrote,
Cool.
but we ended up putting it on the first album, but it was a very different version. And we have all these early versions of it. Well, wouldn't it be great for people to hear that?
Yeah.
Or, hey, look at these songs like, that ended up in Rock and Roll High School Forever, but it wasn't this version of the song. It was like some cheesy 80s Europop version that we reproduced and created for that soundtrack. But that soundtrack wasn't released. The song was never released. And I've had so many people through the years saying, "Are you ever going to release the music from Rock and Roll High School? Are you ever
Right.
going to release that music?" So it's like, okay, here's a chance for people to hear the original music that inspired that music,
Yeah.
and the song that they remember. Obviously, it's a little bit different because it's a different version of it, but it's still the song they remember.
Right.
So things like that, where I thought, there's something here. I think that there's probably a lot of fans out there that would be really excited to have this stuff.
Sure.
So that was kind of what started us on the journey. And then as we went along, it just kind of kept building, looking through old cassette tapes, looking through DAT tapes, all these different various formats that, kind of came out and then went between 86 and 95. I mean, it was a lot of stuff going on, a lot of fluidity in the,
Right.
the process of going from analog to digital. So through that process, we found what now is, our lost songs disc, I guess you would call it. It's called Love Lost, and there's 18 songs on that disc alone
Wow.
that have either never been heard or never been released, or were on a film soundtrack, or were in a video somewhere, but nobody has ever had the ability to own that song, and certainly not a crisp, clean,
Yeah.
freshly mixed version of the song.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I mean, it's really it's a curator's dream, I guess you would say, going through all this kind of stuff, and probably a producer's nightmare to try and refurbish it. But
Right.
we somehow have managed to pull it off, and I think pretty well. And I'm very pleased with the results.
Yeah.
So it's an exciting project, but yes, it's been a tedious task at best.
Well, that's going to make all the fans appreciate everything that you're doing, right? Because you went through a lot of trouble for this, right?
We hope so. We hope
It's
so.
kind.
And
Yeah.
and the thing is, like, it happened during the lockdown. It happened during the quarantine, where a lot of people said, "Well, what did you do? Were you just sitting around? I mean, you were silent, or you were dark, or we didn't hear from you." And it's like, well, I was working. We were working the whole time. Not just that, but we produced an entire new album of music, because the new album has got like 18 songs on
Yeah.
it. So not only were we refurbishing and remixing and remastering all this old stuff, but we were also creating brand new stuff, which obviously is very difficult during a pandemic because you can't get musicians into your studio.
Right. Right.
So we did everything from remote work to, at a certain point we were locked out of the country. And we were locked out of the country for about 10 months,
Wow.
after Trump shut the borders, and
Wow.
there was all that stuff that went on with the pandemic. So we ended up locked out of the country, and what I was doing was basically shipping little parts of my studio over bit by bit as we could,
Oh man.
until I basically got a full running studio in the place where we were stuck, which at the time was Jamaica. Like, we'd gone from, a couple different places. We were in the Caribbean on a vacation at the time that the lockdown happened. And then
Yeah.
we were like kind of basically running from place to place, on boats, and, staying on people's floors, and whatever it took to kind of get through the pandemic, being an outcast in another country, in a third world country,
Right.
nonetheless, during a very dangerous time. So it was a big adventure. And through that big adventure, we recorded, I think 3 or 4 songs outside of the U.S., and then came back, and we had some stuff, some demos that we'd been working on before the lockdown, and we were able to kind of get those back up and running and work on those. And then just like the whole process of recording this stuff, which we have like a drummer who was on COVID lockdown and got COVID twice during
Mm.
this process, who lives in South Africa, and we're sending him stems and files and stuff like that over
Right.
to South Africa, and then he'd play on it and then send it back to us. Or we'd have even musicians here in Los Angeles, and old producers and people that I worked with, digging through their vaults and their warehouses and their whatever to try and find us unreleased material that's never been heard or found. So I mean, it's just, we've had so many people kind of putting their efforts together, and then yet not really working together in many cases,
Yeah.
like,
Right.
because it's all done remotely.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's just been a really crazy process to get all of this together, and I'm really grateful that it's done. And so is my main engineer and co-producer, Greg, who is a multi instrumentalist, super talented
Cool.
genius, and great guy all around. But he's the one who's really had to do the lion's share of it because he had to mix what's, I don't know, somewhere around 60 songs.
Yeah. Wow.
You know,
Wow.
and that's not even including all of the video content. And then when you get into the video content and the magazine that we put together, which is full of unreleased
Oh
photographs,
wow.
never before seen material,
Yeah.
all the lyrics, we had to figure out what the hell I'm saying in some of these tapes where you can barely even hear the audio because it's so garbled, and you're
Right.
trying to decipher, like, what is that, what's that word. So God bless Jake, who is the kind of the overall curator of the box set, because he's the one that really put the magazine together with all the liner notes and all the lyrics, and he directed the documentary. There's a brand new documentary which is in the box set.
Oh wow.
And then once we got to that point, then we were able to start getting into more of the technical side, and advancements in technology, and pioneering these new ideas, like having a hologram pop out on top of the box, which is, I believe, something no other artist has
Oh
ever done in history.
wow.
So, we got to be the first,
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
sure it
cool,
will be
man.
the first of many. I'm sure we won't be the only ones to do it, but
Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool, man. Wow. Uh, and you've got a wide variety of styles on these new songs. I've been listening to a lot of them. You got some rock and roll and funky music and things like that, right?
Yes, there is a wide array of styles. So, I mean, I don't know if you ever heard the original Love Left album.
I hadn't heard
Um,
it, but yeah, but I'm imagining you had kind of some similar songs back in the day, right?
well, so basically, the original Love Left album was, like I said, thrown together kind of at the last minute. So, when it came to style, I was all over the place because I'd always been all over the place. But my original stuff, as you can see quite evidently and clearly by my first music video and the first song I ever wrote and recorded, which is called Runaway,
Yeah, I saw
which
that.
was when I was 15 years old.
Right.
And you can see that there's obviously a very pop sensibility, and, a Michael Jackson thing going
Yeah,
on, and,
yeah.
and there's those similarities, right? So that was where my writing style started. That was where I began. But very quickly, I moved into this kind of psychedelic rock thing where,
Yeah.
I had kind of in that moment started really listening to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, and kind of getting into these old classics, which started shifting and shaping the way that I was writing and the way that I processed, the idea of music. So, there was this kind of duality, because on part of it it's like very pop and very dance, and then there's this other half of it which is like a solid blues rock thing.
Yeah.
And so, like, literally half the album is this blues rock album, which is some really good stuff. I mean, we got, Lita Ford in there playing some sensational lead guitars when she was literally at the apex of her young career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right after or right around the time that she put out that single with Ozzy Osbourne. I mean, it was right in that
Oh
pocket.
yeah. Right.
And so we grabbed her as a complete fluke on a song that happened to be called Lethal Lolita. And it wasn't planned that way. I mean, it just
That's
literally
cool.
fell together.
Wow.
So, stuff like that, where you've got, one of the great hard rock guitarists in the world, playing some sensational stuff. And then you've got, the flip side of it, which is like, one of the things that's talked about in the documentary is one of the guys who played on one of the tracks is a guy named Dean Pleasant, who was the lead guitarist for Suicidal Tendencies.
Okay.
And he comes along to do a session, and it's like this song that ended up in Dream a Little Dream 2 called Feeling Funky, which is very dance. It's very, I wouldn't say it's MJ influence. I'd say, if anything, it's more kind of on the Prince side of
Yeah.
sensibility. Kind of like a mix of like Prince and George Michael kind of sound.
Right.
So it's like we had a couple of these really strong dance songs, and again, they just kind of happened the way they happened. Like for that one, it was, I was working on the movie, and they said, we want another dance sequence for the movie, and we want a song that goes along with the dance sequence. And I thought, okay, well, let me come up with something. And we wrote something I could dance to, and that
Right.
became Feeling Funky. So when Dean Pleasance came in to play on it, he was like, and I think it's Pleasant, not Pleasance. Let me say that right,
Okay.
Dean Pleasant. But when he he said, look, I came in to play this stuff, and Corey knew exactly what he wanted, and it was real funky stuff, and who would have thought, right?
Right.
So you've got something like that where, and he says, and then there's this other guy that's interviewed in the documentary named Luke, who was my bass player in the first band that I put together. And he's like, I got really excited when I walked into the session, for, I think it was Depressed, and I saw Hunt Sales sitting at the drum set. And Hunt Sales is like one of my heroes because he played in David Bowie's Tin Machine.
Oh man.
And I knew this guy is
Cool.
like a complete genius.
Yeah.
So when I saw him sitting at the drum set, I knew we were going to be in really good shape,
Yeah.
So there's a lot of amazing, incredible artists that I was able to gather for the first album, for Love Left, which a lot of people didn't understand. And because of the great array of artists, obviously there's a lot of different directions and styles that album goes in. So when we sat down and thought, okay, what would a sequel to that album look like? Given the fact that the first one was all over the map and there was only 9 songs on it. That's the other thing, is it was, kind of a short album,
Yeah.
in the greater scope of albums. So it was like, okay, well, how do we kind of emulate that kind of variety of choice, but then also at the same time make sure everything kind of fits together? So that's what we did, is we went back in and kind of created, an album with a lot of those same types of sensibilities, where there's a lot of blues rock stuff that's really solid blues rock sounding songs,
Yeah.
and then there's some harder rock songs, and then there's some dance and pop type songs. But then of course we went even further, and we've got a reggae song on this album. We've got a very good kind of psychedelic rock song that's a tribute to a friend of mine who we lost during the process of making the album. So I dedicated that song to him, and just again, it's a little bit all over the map, but I think that each kind of entry has its place,
Yeah.
and it helps tell a story, and that's really what I'm interested in as an artist. I like the idea of concept albums and taking people through some sort of a story.
Right.
So even on the first one, as disjointed as it is, it's a story in 3 parts. The first 3 songs certainly tell a story. And it's like, this is all about love, and it's all about relationships, and, how, you go into a relationship looking for this perfect thing that doesn't really exist, but it's only in our minds. And then,
Right.
then you find out it's not what you thought it was, and she rips your heart out. And then it's about moving on from there, which is the third song, Walk. It's like, okay, now we've got to move on. So,
Right.
when you start to break it down, you can realize that, okay, this is like a play. I mean, there's really 3 sections of songs that have, little stories to them, and all together it tells one story. And then we kind of wanted to recreate that. So that's kind of what we did with this. And if you follow every, lyric, and you really look into the artwork, and you really look into the through line of the lyrics, you see that it really does tell a story.
Yeah. Wow. And I've been listening to some of the songs. You were talking about the feeling funky and the beautiful soul. The beautiful soul
Yes,
sounds
that's
like John Lennon or something with psychedelic sounds, and
Oh, thank you.
yeah, it's
Yes,
really
that's the one I
good.
was talking about. That's,
Yeah,
a bit psychedelic and written to my
that's
friend who we lost. Yes.
really good job. And Without You is a
Thank you.
cool song. I mean, I was enjoying it last night. I was jamming, and really good. I mean, in the lyrics, really deep lyrics. Like what's You Are Free? What's that song all about?
So You Are Free is one of the few songs on this album that wasn't necessarily created for the purpose of this album.
Okay.
It was created as the soundtrack main title song for my documentary that I put out in 2020.
Okay.
So
Cool.
the My Truth film, the documentary about what happened to myself and Corey Haim as children in the industry, obviously it was a very sensational moment in time. We put out that movie. It was a big premiere, and then the movie got hacked.
Oh wow.
So unfortunately, not nearly as many people saw it as I would have liked to have seen it. But that said, we put the single out alongside it, expecting that we would have a regular release for the film. And then, as things go, usually, the film builds momentum, and then you have a hit single that kind of goes along with it, and you're in good shape. So unfortunately, the film got hacked and pirated and didn't have nearly the success we thought it would. But the single itself ended up making the top 20 charts,
Wow, that's good.
the indicator charts anyway, in Billboard, which was a pretty big deal for us,
Yeah,
considering that was my first top 20 hit.
awesome.
So that song is dedicated to Corey Haim, and it's basically a private message to him saying, I finally done what you asked me to do, and I'm sorry that I didn't do it a lot sooner, and I wish that I could have done it back when you first told me this story. If I would have had the wherewithal or the knowledge of what I know now, things probably would have gone a lot differently.
Yeah.
So that's what that song is about. Yeah.
Well, do you think that music helps heal you? I mean, is that what you think it does for you? Because
Absolutely. It
considering
is
what you've been through, yeah,
absolutely a cathartic
yeah,
process.
I figured,
I mean,
yeah,
first of all, just being able to write some of that stuff down, those are your innermost feelings. You know what I mean? These are things that, like Beautiful Soul, I think is a perfect example, because I wrote it the night I got the call that my friend had shot himself,
mm,
and he was like 24 or 25 years old. He was a young
oh
kid,
man,
you know, and you just sit there and you go, why? Why such
mm,
an incredible, beautiful person that, was so tormented, but had so much love in his heart, and such a great, beautiful soul. I mean, there's really no better way to say it than that, and that's what inspired me to write that song. And I think it's one of those moments that, if I hadn't been so struck with pain and grief, I'm sure it would have never come out of me. But
yeah,
the moment inspired the writing, and the writing became, everything I was feeling at that time. So yes, I definitely delve deep into my personal kind of attic and sweep the cobwebs out with my pen.
right. And do you think about reaching out to people? I know, considering what, like you said, what you've been through and things like that. You can reach people through music and with the songs. Aren't you hoping to reach people out there that are listening to these songs and kind of say, "Hey, I've been there," and they can kind of relate to what you've
Yeah,
gone through, right?
absolutely. Well, I think it's listen, music is meant to lift us to a higher plane,
Yeah,
right? I mean, that is the purpose of it, and that's, to me, I when I hear this stuff where it's like, gang banging, and
yeah,
got my bling, and I got my 40 ounces, and I got my my guns and my bitches and all that kind of
right,
stuff. I just don't relate. I don't
right. Can't.
understand that.
Yeah,
To me, that's not music, and I don't mean to insult any genre
right.
or any type of writing, because obviously each person has got to write their experience, and as long as it comes from the heart, or if it comes from a real place, then that's awesome, and I certainly applaud it. But when it comes to, hey, let's write a bunch of trash that doesn't really mean anything, and it's just about ego, and it's about self-serving, and what does that say to the listener?
That's right.
How are you bringing them on a journey? How are you sympathizing with them, or recognizing something within them? I don't feel that you are. I feel it's a miss. So to me, if you have, we have very few opportunities in this world to create art that connects with people on a deeper level. We can all create anything we want and put it out there, but to actually connect with somebody and get them in a place where they go, wow, that helped me in some way.
Right.
Either it inspired me to feel better, or it put me in a positive mood, or maybe it was even something that caused some deep reflection that I might not have, found, or I
Yeah.
might not have had the vehicle or the avenue to get there, had I not been inspired through that music. And that's happened to me, certainly, with listening to other artists
Sure.
throughout my life. I mean,
Sure.
how many times have you been depressed and you put on a certain song and it changes your mood?
That's right.
Or you're scared or you're frustrated, you go, man, I just don't want to think about the world right now, and then you put on some other music that just makes you forget everything.
Right.
Or there's ways that music speaks to us, and hits us directly in the soul, that I don't think any other form of communication does.
No, I agree.
And that is why I respect it so much, and that is why I try my best to tap into that common thread that we can all relate to.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to make as I want my music to be artistic and interesting, obviously, with a kaleidoscope of colors. But at the same time, I also want to make sure that the lyrics are very, human and very based in reality and something that we can all connect with, because I think we need it now more than ever.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and you've got Curtis Young helping you out on this album.
That's right.
Yeah, that's
That's
cool.
right. It's his breakout performance.
Cool.
I mean, he's put out a single or two, a few singles, but he hasn't put out an album yet. So I feel very lucky to have him at such an early stage of his career. I see huge things coming from him in the future. Yeah, he's a very, very talented guy, super nice guy,
Yes,
amazingly cool guy. I don't know if you've ever had the chance to meet him
I haven't,
or
but the song is great. By the way, I was thinking, man, that this might be a big hit. I mean, it's a really good
Thank
song,
you.
man.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate that. And from your lips to God's ears,
Hey,
we're
amen.
working on the release schedule for it right now, actually trying to get the single lined up and released finally, because it was supposed to come out before the holidays. And then it was like the distributors didn't want to put anything out, that wasn't Christmas related until
Yeah,
after January. And so it's very hard. If we would have put it out in the summer when it was originally intended, I think it would have been a lot easier. But because, between the holidays and then this giant wave of COVID hitting
yeah,
everybody, it's kind of knocked us all for a loop. Nobody was kind of prepared for it or expecting it, right?
for
So
sure.
that's where we are, unfortunately. But I do agree. I think that once it gets out there, people are going to react very positively, and I know that because we put together this little preview based on an interview I did with this thing that's called the Life Minute, and this wonderful writer who I did a kind of a Zoom interview with, she edited it together and she said, "Do you have any music I can put in the background?" So I said, "Well, why not? Let's just tease the new single by
Yeah,
putting it behind it."
right.
And even though it's only like 15 or 20 seconds of the song, immediately everybody was commenting like, "Oh, what's that song? Comeback King. What's that? That's really
It's
good."
cool. It's really good.
So
I'm telling you that. I mean,
thank you.
I know. I'm just saying. I'm going to throw that out there, man. It's going to do something. I'm just going to tell you. Um.
I hope you're right, man. I hope you're right. So we're also in the process of trying to get a video together for
Oh,
that as
cool.
well. But again, with trying to shoot a video right now is so difficult,
Yeah.
because of everybody's sick, and I mean, we just went through COVID again, third time, me and
Oh,
my wife.
jeez, man.
So we got better just in time for this party in 2 days. But now I'm hoping that other people are able to attend the party, because I mean, like literally everybody I know has got COVID. Like my whole
Oh, man.
family got COVID. Everybody, my uncle, my cousins, my brothers and sisters, like
Oh,
everybody.
gee.
So it's a scary time. It's an uncertain time, and very hard time to produce
Yeah.
content and get it out there. And then certainly to throw any type of event to celebrate it. It's very tricky.
Well, I'm looking forward to that, and I'm
Thank you.
I'm excited for you. And but hey, let me jump on to something. Since I've got the one and only Corey Feldman, I just want to.
You got it, brother.
Hey, love your movies, of course. Hey, I've listened to you since you were the voice of Copper in
Oh
the
wow.
Fox and I
That's a
watched
long
that.
time.
I was
You're
you.
showing your age, my friend. We
I was
might be.
hey you've got me by I think about 3 years, but you were born in
Okay.
'71, right? '71, I think.
So you're 20. You're 22 as well, is what you're
22.
trying to say.
That's exactly right.
Yes,
You
there you
nailed it, my
go.
friend.
Okay.
Let's
Perfect.
let's see. Friday the 13th. So cool, right? Gremlins, The Goonies, and by the way, one of my best friends got killed years ago, but his favorite movie was The Goonies, and he would be so happy that I was talking to you. And
Oh, well,
man,
God bless. I'm sorry for your loss.
thanks, man.
That's
He
sad.
he just man, The Goonies. Who growing up in the '80s did not love The Goonies and want to get a map and find this treasure? Just all that. Such a good movie,
Right,
right? And
right.
and
Well, listen,
you
I
know,
feel very blessed to have been a part of things like that. Obviously, it's a different world, and it was a different time. And for me, it's a different perspective, because it's one of both pride but also frustration, in the sense that I wasn't so aware of my choices, and I wasn't so aware of how lucky I was to be part of such things, because to me it was just another job.
Yeah.
I was working so much and so regularly on so many things that it was just another job. I mean, I was excited about it, obviously. I was happy to be there. I loved the experience. But, and I'm sure somewhere we all knew that this movie would live on and that it would have a legacy. But we never knew that it would become what it's become as one of the great family films of all
Sure.
time,
Yeah.
and the biggest title in Warner Brothers' entire catalog when it comes to family films, which is shocking to me because they have Wizard of Oz and Willy Wonka,
Yeah.
in their lineup. I mean, obviously Wizard of Oz is MGM,
Right.
but I think somehow they ended up with the distribution, or I don't know what happened there.
Right.
But the bottom line is, to have a film like Goonies stand out amongst
It's
those is pretty impressive. Those were my childhood. Growing up, I
that's
used to
it.
love Willy Wonka and
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz, and I remember
Yeah.
thinking when we were making Goonies, this is going to be like a Willy Wonka for the future. I think I even said that in certain interviews, if you go back, where I was like, yeah, this will be the Willy Wonka of a future
Oh yeah.
generation,
I agree.
and
Yeah.
and that's what it became.
Well, and another thing, I want to mention another movie, The Burbs. Right? Hey,
Yes.
the character you play, how close was that to the real you? I'm just wondering.
Not at all. I mean, honestly, not at all.
Okay.
Uh,
Darn. No, I'm just kidding.
I
No, it
mean,
was fun.
not to say
It's
I never
funny though.
smoked weed or I was never a stoner kid, because I definitely was that.
Right.
But, maybe on my worst day, I represented something like Ricky Butler, but not on the norm. I mean, obviously, I was a businessman by the time I was 10 years old. I was
Yeah.
writing my own contracts,
Wow.
reading my own contracts, you know what I mean? Changing, making notations and changes to contracts literally by 12 years old. By 15 years old, I was completely doing my own business because,
Oh.
both of my parents who had been my managers to that point were out of the picture.
Mm.
So by license to drive, I was entirely engaged in doing my own deals and, running the entire business. So I'd been running my own business since that time. So, it was a little bit different for me. I guess, I had more wherewithal than most kids. So to dumb it down and play a character like Ricky Butler, obviously was, just that, a character. But, in some ways I regret that, because if you look at kind of all those characters, they're as iconic as they are, but you look at, Mouth from Goonies, and you look at Teddy from Stand By Me, and you look at
Yes.
Edgar from Lost Boys, and you look at, Ricky from The Burbs, and then all these other characters that I played alongside it, like Rock and Roll High School Forever
Yeah.
or whatever. I mean, they were always this kind of funny, relatable, likable guy, but they were always kind of an a-hole, you know? And then, when I turned 19 or 20 or whatever it was, and I got sober, because I was, I was having, growing pains, I guess you would call it,
Yeah.
and certainly brought on by the bad influences in my life. I was basically under the care, I guess you would say, from, even though I was technically on my own, my father had put this person into my life that was supposed to be my assistant and supposed to be my chaperone, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And he became the guy that was with me every day. Well, that guy was feeding me drugs.
Oh wow.
And so, he
Mm.
fed me drugs from 15 to 17 and a half when I finally got away from him. And once I went, I got away from him, I went to rehab, and then I came out, and my life was completely different and completely changed my perspective on everything. And that was by, 18 and a half, 19 years old. By 1990, I was sober. So I went in 1989 after I got arrested, and then, got sober by, the end of 89 or the beginning of 90, somewhere in there. And by the time I got out of rehab at the end of that year, I think it was around September, October, I finally completed Cry Help in 1990. And I had a very different perspective and a very different view of life. So, coming from there, it was like, oh my God, now I've got to reinvent everything. I've got to
Yeah.
start from scratch, show people that I'm serious and show people that I'm dedicated, and, where I'm at mentally and all of this stuff. So I didn't know what was next. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I didn't know if my career would go on. And one of the things that I kind of regretted was the fact that people don't know who I am.
Yeah.
You know, they know me as this fictional version of me, which is this very loudmouth, outspoken, kind of bratty kid.
Right.
And I'm none of those things.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I'm a very quiet, shy, introverted dude
Yeah.
who likes to sit in the corner. Like I would go to, parties in, 1991, 1992, 1993, and I would be the guy sitting in the corner. I would go to a nightclub and I'd be the guy sitting at a booth in the corner. I wasn't out there macking on girls and being Mr. Bravado and being Mr. Cool, and people did not understand it. They were very confused. They were like, who is this guy?
Right. Right.
I thought we were inviting Corey Feldman to the party. I didn't think we were inviting Mr. Rogers. And people just didn't understand that. Like, first of all, one of the big things for decades, and I mean decades, people tried to label me as a cokehead,
Oh
and they
man.
tried to label me as like, a drinker, which obviously if you look at a character like Ricky Butler, you're going to assume that this guy does drugs and drinks alcohol.
Right. Right. Right.
And in fact at the time I did.
Right.
But I was at the very tail end of that, and right after Rock and Roll High School, I'm sorry, right after the Burbs, I did Rock and Roll High School, and Rock and Roll High School was the last film that I did before I went into rehab. So I
Wow.
was like, really at the tail end of my kind of torturous development phase, and then went into my like, self-healing and self-love and all that kind of stuff right after it. So by the time I came out of rehab in 90 and, was, looking towards the future, I realized that I had a lot of repair work to do to like people, to let people in and let them see who I really was, so that they would be a bit more forgiving, because it's
Yeah.
really easy to kind of blow off the narcissistic punk kid that you think I am. But then when you find out that actually, no, there's this kind of sweet, somber guy in there that actually does care and actually does have a good heart and is not the egotistical brat that we've kind of grown up believing he is on the screen.
Right.
And that was really a hard thing to get over, was to make people see me for who I was, as opposed to these characters that I had portrayed one after another with all these similar traits.
Oh sure. Well, back in the day, talking about back in the day though, when I was teenager, late '80s, I had all the posters, the Teen Bop magazines. I had the Debbie Gibson posters, and I was putting Debbie Gibson on the wall. But on the
Of
back
course you did.
of course, and on the back
Right.
though, it was you and Corey and
So
Jason Bateman.
what you're trying to say is Corey and I had a lot of wall time. We
Hey,
had a lot of
don't tell anybody. I had you and Corey on my wall, but it was just
right.
facing the
Well,
wall.
yes, on your wall, but staring at your wall.
Staring, yeah,
Unfortunately,
staring. Debbie Gibson was staring at me, man. Come on, I
so
had to make a.
we were like the dunce kids in the class that had to sit in the corner and stare at the wall
That's
all
right.
day while you were,
Forgive.
thinking fantasy
Oh
thoughts
man.
about Debbie
Hey,
Gibson. I got you.
don't tell anybody. Hey, forgive me. I've been waiting
No,
all
no,
these
I
years to the
understand.
no, but speaking of Corey, and I know that y'all had some times together and things like that. Does he pass by your mind a lot? Do you think about you know?
Every single day,
Mm,
every single day.
wow.
There is not a day that passes in my lifetime that I do not think or feel or, wish that he was still here.
Yeah.
On so many multitudes of levels and for so many reasons. I mean, obviously, one of those being that I could have never predicted that after he was gone, his mom would go completely AWOL and, decide to blame
Mm,
every problem in their lives on me,
mm,
which is exactly what's happened.
that's awful.
She kind of made me the scapegoat for every mistake she ever made in parenting.
Mm,
And sadly, has kind of built this opposition against me telling the truth, and getting the story out, which is something he asked me to do. And when you talk about regrets, I would say the biggest regret that I ever had or have is the fact that the day that he made me promise to tell his story, that I didn't ask him to put it down in writing.
mm,
Because if I had done that, this whole thing would have rolled out differently.
Right.
Like it would have never been this way, you know. It would have been really easy to show, really easy to say, here it is. This is what he asked me to do, and I'm honoring his wishes. But because I didn't have that forethought, and who would? Because at the time, of course, I didn't think he was going to die.
Right.
You know, um, in my mind, he was going to, get through this, and he was going to be fine, and he was already on the healing side of things, and and that's what our break was about. We took this break after the two Corys, and it was like, let's take a year off,
Right.
to try and heal. And my hope was that when I saw him again, he'd be kind of reinvigorated and better. And he was. That's the kicker.
Mm-hmm.
He was. He had taken the year off seriously. He had been taking care of his mom, and he was doing good things. And it was so just out of nowhere and so tragic. So yeah, that is my biggest regret, is that I never got him to put in writing what his wishes were. And then beyond that, it's just, look, we all make mistakes, and even though you're a kid, you look back at it and say, well, I could have made this choice differently, or I
Right.
could have, not done this or not done that, that he requested me to do, or whatever. Could I have been a better friend? Could I have been a better person? Could I have done anything differently? And I don't think you can avoid that. I think that's, I'm sure with your best friend, you felt the same way after he was gone.
Yes.
What could I have done differently to make those days brighter, or to help him out of that hole, or whatever.
Right.
And I think that's just the human nature. I think that, even if I didn't have uh, Judy with a constant chorus telling me that I'm wrong,
Oh
or
man.
that I did things wrong as a kid or as an adult or whatever, that I still would have had some amount of regret, and just wish things had gone differently. I mean,
Well,
we were
yeah.
both dealt a pretty crappy hand. I mean, there's no two ways around that.
Right. Yeah,
And
that's
you can
awful.
only do what you can do, I suppose.
Well, the talking about the regrets though, talking about my friend. His name was Joseph Madden is his name, by the way. But
I'm sorry, you broke up there. What
oh,
was that?
his name was Joseph Madden. I just want to say that name to you so you can uh, understand. But he was trying to call me one night, and I didn't answer the phone because I thought I was too busy or something. And I didn't talk. I never talked to him again. And
Right.
then he got killed.
That's exactly it.
So it's like regrets are like, what can you do? But you know what? The best thing you can do is keep doing what you think he would have liked for you to do, and make somebody else smile, make somebody else happy, and find
Yeah.
somebody kind of like him that you could help out or do something for, right?
Well, and that kind of is where I was with Ben. Like, my relationship with Ben Keogh, um, was very much like that. And when he came into my life, I saw a young Corey, and I, kind of was like, I mean, the first time we met, we gave each other the biggest hug, like as if it was Corey coming back to hug me.
Oh wow,
And I told him right then and there, I said, man, I see Corey in your eyes.
wow,
I don't know what it is, but I see Corey in your eyes. He's like, that's really weird. And I'm like, yeah, that is really weird. And he's like, but I do feel like I've known you forever. And I was like, yeah, I feel the same way. And we just had this instant connection. It was the strangest thing. And then the fact that I lost him so young, as a friend, uh, it really, really messed me up, and that's, I think, why I felt inspired to write Beautiful Soul, because it was like, here we go again. Like, how many times do we have to lose this magic of this beautiful young soul that has so much to offer the world, and has so much love in their hearts, that I don't know. It's just so tragic. It
oh,
really is.
oh
There's
no,
nothing worse than losing someone young that's got a great future and great potential for themselves, and you just know that it's because the people around them didn't do the things they should have done, to make sure that they felt special, or to
right,
make sure they knew that they were loved.
right,
And like you said, you can't beat yourself up. I feel the exact same way. I mean, with Corey, going back to that, there was a weekend right before he passed away that I could have invited him to, and he was upset with me that I didn't invite him. And at the time it was like, well, it wasn't the right situation,
Yeah.
but you'll be at the next one, no big
Right.
deal, and then you find out there was no next one,
That's right. That's right.
but the one thing about our relationship that I guess kind of makes it all okay was the fact that the very last time we looked in each other's eyes, he said something to me that was so powerful and so meaningful that I'll never forget it. And what that was he kind of grabbed my hand, and we had this kind of secret handshake we did. And he grabbed my hand and he looked in my eyes and he said, um, "Thank you." And I said, "For what?" And he said, "For showing me the world through your eyes. It's a beautiful place, and I'm glad I got to see it."
Wow.
And that was almost like he knew,
Yeah.
you know. I don't know how, but that's literally the words he used to me. And we had this big hug, and that was it. And then we spoke on the phone a few times after that, but I never saw him again.
Wow. And that's you never know. That's why you should always be the best friend to everybody you can. And you never know.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I thank you so much for talking to me today. It's like a dream, man, to have
Oh, thank
Corey
you. God
Feldman.
bless you.
I mean, but really, man.
Well, I appreciate the support, and I thank you for taking the time. And I'm really glad to hear that you're enjoying the album.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
sorry, I know you probably didn't get the whole box, so you haven't seen all the
right.
incredible artwork or the video stuff that goes along with it. But let me tell you, it's an incredible scrapbook for any fan of the 80s and 90s,
Right.
along with, of course, a great new album. But
Oh,
let me just poster myself. No, I'm joking. I'm proud of it, but I think that the real treasure in this box set is the great memories that people will have when they get to put this stuff on for the first time.
yeah. Or is how many is going to be available? Or is it going to be a lot more out there?
Only
Or
500.
only 500. Okay, so they
Yep,
need
it's
to
a
act
limited
now.
edition. It's a very expensive thing to make, and with the economy being what it is right now, and people struggling, look at we're having a hard time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm constantly finding myself putting it on sale to get the numbers moving, but those sales prices are killing me.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Right.
you know,
Well, they should
but
they
we
should
want to
get
make
them.
sure we get them into the hands of as many people as we can, because it is a great piece of art. I believe. I think we've created um, a really beautiful box, a really beautiful package, and all of it from the artwork, that was done by the original artist Howard Tiemann, who came back and did new art for us, to the graphic art, which was done by a Grammy Award nominated artist, and who also was part of the first album. So it's not like I just pulled random people and said, "Hey, why don't you come do this for me?"
Right.
These were people that have been involved with my music since 1990,
Right.
and they came back and they gave meaningful contributions to this project, along with, of course, a cast of new people that weren't involved, like Don Dawkin and Curtis Young and Mickey Thomas, who, even though we worked together in 1987 or 1988, we had never actually sang together. We'd never done anything musically together. So this was like a great opportunity for that. So, again, it's the nostalgia factor, I
Yeah.
think, is through the roof on this thing. So I really hope as many people get to experience it as possible.
Well, I think there a lot of people are going to jump on this because it's really cool to have, and especially if they love the actor Corey Feldman, they're going to love the musician, and they're going to just say, "Hey, I got to have this thing." I think it's going to happen, and then
I agree. And not only that, but then again, there's also things when you just go to the acting side of it that, and I don't know if you even know this, but like there's like an interview on the set from Jason Robards,
oh,
from Dream a Little Dream,
okay,
where I had done a concert one day, for the extras to keep them in the seats during the theater scene,
yeah,
and so they interviewed Jason and asked him about what he thought about my musical performances,
oh
and what he
wow,
thought about me as an actor and as a singer and as a dancer and stuff like that, which nobody's seen, you
cool,
know.
cool,
And I've had it in the vaults all these years, and we're finally releasing it. So things like that, which tie directly back to those movies and to those places, and I think that's going to be the real charm of it for people like yourself who are going to just take a deep dive into nostalgia.
yeah, for sure. I think people are going to be excited about it, and I can't wait to tell everybody and post this and
Oh,
show
thank you
everybody.
so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your support, and it means the world to me. So thank you so very much.
Well, you're welcome, and I'm hoping and praying and wishing the best for you, and I do believe good things are going to come for you, man.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, from your lips to God's ears, my friend.
All right, man. Well, take care, and I hope to talk to you again one day.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
All right,
Thank you.
man. All right, bye.
Okay, bye bye.